Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we have a special video. So previously I've spoken a lot about interviews, but then I never actually talked about what exactly goes into an interview. If you haven't seen the video yet on exactly how to prepare for an interview, I think that's just as important as actually doing the interview. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce Kajal, our special guest on today's video, and then we're going to go right into it.
Hey everyone, my name is Kajal and I'm a robotics software engineer, and thank you so much Christine for inviting me here. As she mentioned, today we're doing a two-part video where we're talking about how to prepare for a behavioral interview and now how to actually perform at the behavioral interview. And in the end, we also have something special for you, what to do after your behavioral interview. So make sure to stick till the end. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to Christine's channel. As for my channel, I also talk about job search process and I talk about robotics. Given my background in robotics, I also do tutorial videos where I teach you how you can get started with robotics. And with that, back to you, Christine.
So first off, I want to ask, how exactly should we even approach a behavioral question before we even do any mock interviews?
So with all behavioral questions, you have to remember one thing: tell a story. Nobody wants a question and answer sort of session. They want a conversation. And the way to do that is by telling a story. And with all behavioral questions, the interviewer wants to get to know you and your personality. And the best way to do that is through a story. And what you do in a story is you start with a problem and then you talk about the solution. So for example, you can talk about how you disagreed with someone because XYZ happened, and then how you solved it. You either spoke to them or you got a third person involved or anything else that you did. And not just that, it doesn't always have to be about something you solved. You can also talk about what went wrong and what you learned from it. For example, you had a disagreement and you both ended up shouting at each other and it became a huge fight. And then in the end, after a couple of days or maybe weeks, you realize, hey, you know what? That was a stupid thing to do. I should have stayed calm and I should have known how to speak better. And that is a story again. It's more of a retrospective as to what you did wrong and what you learned from it. And another thing you can talk about is growth. That the first time you encountered, okay, you didn't know what to do, but then you did the retrospective and you learned, and then you applied it the second time you faced this similar situation, and you could see how you've grown. And that is a really great story to tell. And that is why in our preparation session, we talked about, write down all the things that have happened with you so you can convert them into stories for specific questions.
So in this particular segment of this video, we're actually going to do a quick mock interview. Kajal is actually going to be more in the perspective of an experienced hire, trying to use all these technical jargon or just like a very complicated work experience and then try to dumb it down into a story. I'll actually be talking from a perspective of a college student with no experience or nothing that you think of at least. And then we're going to try to spin that way. So in case of any situation that you're in, you get to see exactly how to do that. So the first question we're going to ask is, tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with someone.
Wow, that's a really good question. So let me talk about the time when I was working at a robotics startup. My team was collaborating with the R&D team, and we were working on this application for our robot. And unfortunately, the robot failed. Now, as we were troubleshooting, the person from R&D and I had disagreement in terms of what went wrong. And we were both going at it with both of our individual logics. I was saying that, hey, this is what's going wrong and this is why the robot is failing. And the other person was like, no, that's not possible. This is how it's going. And we went on and on and on. And what helped was a third person came in and said, why don't you stop and just prove your theory? Like, you have so-and-so theory, just take a robot into our lab and try out your theories and prove it that way. And you know what? That worked. Sometimes when you're trying to go against someone else, sometimes they will not see your perspective just because they are thinking in their own way. And that's great sometimes because you want people to think in different ways, but sometimes it doesn't work out. So here's a solution that you can try, which is just try it out and have practical proof. And that was my lesson from that whole experience, that if someone is not getting your point, see if you can, just put it in practical terms and show them, because showing works way more than just telling about it. And yes, that is how I learned how to deal with disagreements.
That's a great answer. So for my response, I'm going to be talking more on like a school project, which is what everyone should be having, regardless if you have any work experience. So for a class project that I had where I had about a team of 8 people, we were trying to do a market segmentation report. And honestly, we were just not entirely sure who exactly would be our target market. So when we were looking into like who would be the most attractive for this particular product, which was in this case a pet bowl, we were like, should it be a cat owner or should be a dog owner? And because of that, it could be completely different based off of the actual direction of the product design we want to go for, since we want to make sure everything was attractive for the right owner. So when we were trying to battle it out, it ended up becoming very segmented in the case of like, we were doing us versus them. And this whole thing was a team project. So we had to really think about, do we really want this one little decision to tear us apart? We need to really have trust in our entire team and actually see exactly respect each other and actually value each other's opinions. At that point, we were just kind of throwing insults at each other and honestly was not the best way to do this. So we were just thinking about, okay, what is the best way for the project? And then not actually get our personal feelings involved. When I came in, I was really more of the mediator of trying to put things to perspective. So that way it's not exactly just us versus them. It's really mostly what actually answers the problem at the time. So that was my role in this entire mediation session. I think at the time, everyone was really blown up and then we were, every person was angry and they wanted whatever was right, but we had to really bring it to perspective. Otherwise we couldn't move on into the project and actually fail the project eventually. So this is exactly how I helped solve the disagreement. And at the end of the day, we were actually really happy because we had a very targeted approach in terms of how we want to handle team decisions. And I actually became one of the team mediators whenever we had any issues. We're going to break down Kajal's response, and we're also going to break down my response on exactly what was good and what was bad. From my particular perspective, I actually thought Kajal's was really good because regardless if you had a good experience or not, you still learned a lesson. And honestly, it was just one of those things where it was a good story too. So even if you weren't even answering the question, I was actually really enthralled. It answered the question, it told exactly how it happened and what exactly Kajal did. So that was something that was really cool because it also tells me about her morals and her values and to see if it's in line with the company.
And that is how Christine's answer went as well. She started talking about all these tiny details that sort of get someone involved in your story. And she talked about the market segment. And then even though she wasn't the one in the disagreement, she talked about a disagreement. And this is a great way sometimes to deflect the answer if you don't have a particular story. You yourself are not in a disagreement, but you saw 2 other people in disagreement and you helped mediate that situation. So it shows your values of you're someone who can help smooth things over. And 2, you do understand what happens when someone disagrees. So even if you end up disagreeing with someone else, you know what to do and what not to do. So again, talk about something that's a story to get the people involved and what you learned from it.
And if you've noticed what both of us have done, we actually use the STAR method. So that way you can kind of, even though you may not have been in the situation, you understand exactly what's going on and what was the result. So the next question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? A very, very common question, but you need to have down.
My strength and weakness. For my strength, I want to say logical thinking and troubleshooting when it comes to coding. And here's an interesting thing that I didn't notice, but my partner did. That when it comes to troubleshooting, I put on my detective hat and I'm just at it. And it comes from my love of reading detective novels, be it Hercule Poirot or Sherlock. I love reading them. And that is the exact approach I use when it comes to troubleshooting. Sort of go over the facts, look through the code one by one, do little experiments to see, okay, if this is the cause, then this is how it should affect. And that kind of helps me troubleshoot and get down to the root of the problem so I can fix it. And I think that is definitely one of my strengths. As for my weakness, I want to say it was a weakness. So I used to not be good at public speaking. I remember the time when I went up to a stage and I think it was a storytelling competition and I just froze. And not just froze, after 2 minutes into it, I just ran off the stage and I was ashamed for a really long time. But you know what I did? I was like, okay, I need to know how to speak to public because if I want a career, I'm going to have to do presentations. So I started going to these public speaking club called Toastmasters, and it has helped me a lot. I am no longer running away from stages, but at the same time, I'm able to do a decent presentation. So yes, my strength is logical thinking and troubleshooting. And I would say an area of improvement for me is public speaking.
Sounds good. And for my particular experience, I'm going to be using here is retail experience, which most people have probably had a part-time job in either high school or college. So for my particular example, it will actually be from Staples when I was actually a sales associate. So during my time at Staples, I was in high school, so I had so many different problems coming at me. And especially in high school, I had absolutely no experience. So a lot of my strengths and weaknesses came out very clearly. And the first thing was that actually my weakness was really just how to actually handle things under pressure. It was my very first time doing customer service, so I didn't know exactly what was the right thing to say. Maybe you'll accidentally trigger something for whatever the customer will be. And during the back to school season, when everyone else is trying to buy their supplies, we had lines out the door. So we were trying to figure exactly how exactly can we handle this in the most productive way, but also make sure everyone is happy, because by the end of the time that they actually come to my side of the line, they're already angry and agitated. And my weakness was really just how exactly do I deal with a very difficult client, in this case, a customer, and how can I do it in a way that it will let them trust me? Because especially if I'm a high school student, they're gonna be like, oh, I want your manager. I don't want to listen to you. I want the manager to help me get the discount I deserve. So in those situations, I had to really bring myself up. And this is actually where my strength comes in, and actually try to listen to the customer, because where the customer really wants, they have to get what they want. But you also have to make sure that it also is conducive of what, like, let's say Staples policy is. You can't always do everything for them just because they're the customer. So you need to make sure to have them understand, like, yes, everyone is stressed out. This is back to school. Everyone is trying to buy their supplies. And for us, we're also trying to do our best to deliver excellent customer service. The kind of strength I want to bring out here is I have a really good way of communicating with customers to make sure that they feel very comfortable and eventually feel satisfied. I think my communication skills are really good, but also sometimes I struggle under pressure. However, that was since high school. So I've actually worked through that through college and in projects and also internships and jobs. So I'm really happy to be able to do this. And eventually I'll show you that I can do that at this company as well. So these were the answers that we had for this question. Completely different, actually. In this case, it was like one strength and one weakness, but then there's also like a story behind it and how you can use your strength to your weakness. So there's many different ways where you can try to complement each other, but also supplement. So Kajal, did you have any feedback for me?
Yeah, what you did is a great job. This is something you all should remember. When an interviewer asks you about your weakness or some negative things about you, show it in a light that makes it positive, or talk about something that is completely unrelated. So in my case, I started with public speaking, which has nothing to do with my ability to write a code because I'm a robotic software engineer. But at the same time, I sort of brought it in terms of doing a presentation, which is sort of related to my job, and I might have to give a presentation at some point, but it's not the most important thing. So there are two ways to sort of answer weaknesses. Either talk about something completely unrelated and bring it in, or talk about a weakness that you can overcome through your strength. So always talk about something that has grown or that is not related. You don't want to give them a reason to not hire you, but at the same time answer their question.
So this is also a really good point, because we talked about growth. And even though maybe this was probably years ago, you still want to show that you have grown. And this was a strength and weakness as well. So let's say, for example, in the perspective of consulting, if you are a subscriber to my channel, most likely you're interested in consulting. This could actually help a lot, because you can bring these transferable skills. You're using relevant experience too. So that way you can clearly show that you would be a good fit for the job.
And with that, here's our bonus that Christina is going to give you what to do after your interview and seal the deal.
Mm-hmm. So what happens after the interview is actually very important as well. You may be thinking that once you're done, you could just leave and then you can just relax and do whatever you want, but you actually have to do a thank you email. And what's really important is that you should be doing it no more than 24 hours since the interview. Most likely, a lot of the interviewers have actually already have an idea of if they would want to pass you or not. And they may have even verbally said it to you if they pass, or they wouldn't say it if they want to deny you. But this is just something that this can actually help you down the line. If you write a thank you email, this thank you email can actually help push the envelope if they were maybe deciding between if they should pass you or not. And this thank you email should be really intentional too. I actually am not a fan of templates. A lot of people are asking for templates or Googling for templates. You should really personalize it to the actual interviewer. So that's the key point, to the interviewer, because if you are having an interview, you don't want to copy paste it across maybe the 3 interviews you just had back to back. You want to actually tailor it to the interviewer. So if, for example, you were talking about how their favorite moment at the company was a holiday party, and then that's where they noticed how everyone was so exciting and happy and whatnot, which was something that you probably would not normally get, then you would probably want to mention that, so that to say that maybe that was a main reason why this company was really attracted to you, that despite being a huge company, you actually found a community in there. So that's something that you can mention in your thank you email. Again, I'm not a huge fan of templates. You should always personalize it, and that way you can almost guarantee a response. And if you get a response to the thank you email, that's even better. So you always want to mention, even though this is kind of a way to say like, oh, I have any questions, or that I loved this during the interview, you also want to make sure to thank you the recruiter for their time. And if this is not a recruiter, maybe this is someone that's actually on the hiring manager team, then you want to thank them for their time, because they definitely took time away from their job to do this for this interview, because they definitely took their time out when it comes to away from their day job and then recruiting, because they always want to make sure they have the right talent. And if you thank them, they're going to know that you are someone that I would actually potentially want on my team because you actually care about my time. And this sometimes, like, I would like to actually think about, if it's on a Friday, make sure to do the email on the same exact day. So the 24 hours don't necessarily work on a weekend. After all of this is done, you want to start preparing for your final round. So in the case that you do get an invitation for the final round, you want to start researching either on Glassdoor, networking, and try to see what's the next round. So that way, by the time the next interview comes, you're prepared to kill it. So that is all we have for today's video. And honestly, I think it's just really easy to kind of see what you could do as long as you plan. So make sure to check out Kajal's video over here on exactly how to plan for the interview, because a lot of this can really get you frazzled if you don't plan enough. That way you're just like all of a sudden like, oh, you're doing all this, and then you don't even know what stories to bring out. So if you want to talk about, like, let's say strengths and weaknesses, what can I do to use? And you don't want to be thinking on the spot for like 5 minutes. You want to be prepared, and that's exactly why you should be watching the video.
And once again, thank you for having me, Christine. Make sure you all subscribe to Christine's channel because she does amazing work.
And make sure to check out Kajal's channel as well. It should be down in the description, including all of her social media handles. And definitely check it out, because I think if you're interested in robotics, there's not a lot of tutorials online. You just want to go check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and see you guys next time.